Hello and welcome to episode 429 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan, as always, joined by Evan Silva, and the NFL season is nearly upon us. No big deal. Evan, how's it going?
It's going great. Today we're going to be talking about some fades, some guys we are drafting around.
Yes. As Evan said, today's show is about players we aren't taking. We did a show on players we are taking. You can go back and find that last week. These are players we're fading, players we are shying away from, if you will. Before we get into it, important announcement. Our in-season player prop subscription is live on the site on EstablishTheRun.com. I want to be clear. This is a separate subscription from our normal fantasy subscription. Props are a total one-off a la carte option. There's just been an insane amount of people asking me about this, and I get it. Everyone saw our record over the last few years, but this really is a niche product, and you want to read the full details for yourself to see if it makes sense for you. So head to the site to learn more. You can find it on my Twitter, or you can also find it in the menu under betting or under the team tab. Also, note that this podcast is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. They have this ridiculous $2 million to first, $1 million to second best ball tournament running right now. $25 buy-in, best way to put your knowledge to use. Best way to get ready for your home league. If you use promo code ETR when you sign up, they will match your first deposit up to $100. It's really unbelievable contest. Best UI and UX in all of the best ball world. All right, Evan, let's get into it here. By the way, if you want all of Evan's fades for this year, the Shy Away article is indeed up. We're just going to highlight a few here, pick out a few that were certainly on as fades. Evan will go with about 4. I will go with about 4 fades also, and we'll talk about them. Evan, go ahead with your first Shy Away candidate.
My first is Davante Adams. And I mean, we've talked a lot about why I'm not drafting Davante Adams this year. And it's all about ADP. Because the guy goes, number 8.
Yeah, I was just going to say his ADP on Underdog right now is 10th, but I've seen him go 8th, 9th, 10th in that range.
Right. And he goes there every single time. And, I have him like, I don't know, he's like 13th right now, actually. Mm-hmm. But I'm never going to get him there. And I've just kind of come to grips with that. I mean, I'm a little bit scared about this one, honestly, because this division, this AFC West division there are going to be a plethora of shootouts in this division. And Davante Adams is really good. Derek Carr is good enough to get him the ball. It's just, I think that the situation has changed. His environment is not nearly as conducive to extreme volume as it was in Green Bay, where, he left behind a receiver core of Randall Cobb and Allen Lazard and, maybe Robert Tonyan and, all that. And now he's going to a receiver core where they've got Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow, who's really freaking good, like one of the best slot receivers in the league. I think that Davante Adams will be playing outside a lot. Derek Carr likes to throw the ball in the middle of the field. And I just think that, going from that situation in Green Bay, the literal back-to-back MVP, Aaron Rodgers, they were symbiotic on the field. I think that there's just enough of a downgrade here that there are just a handful of receivers that I want to take above Davante Adams. And that means I'm not going to get Davante Adams.
Yeah.
And Leone just put out a thread. It is killing me. He thinks that Davante Adams is going to be like the number 1 overall fantasy wide receiver. I know we do the bit, the man versus machine bit, but I truly have a ton of respect for Leone's opinion. So, that instills a little bit more fear into me. I'm just being honest,
Yeah.
But I'm telling you that I'm not taking Davante Adams this year.
So I don't get a lot of Davante Adams either, but it's just because I have Steph Diggs ahead of him. I mean, and I think Steph Diggs is clearly a better pick.
That's enough to do it. Like if you have Diggs ahead of him, like you're not going to get Davante Adams, period.
Right. And also one thing I would note on the Waller stuff, I know people have been worried about Waller not practicing. I really think this was like a hold in. In other words, Darren Waller switching agents. He wants a new contract. His current contract isn't even guaranteed until week 1. And so it'd be silly for him to be out there in training camp right now until he gets a new deal done, reportedly switching over to Drew Rosenhaus. All right. Evan's first fade is Davante Adams. My first fade is going to be one that you guys have heard about plenty already. It's Michael Thomas. He goes 58.5 overall on Underdog. Michael Thomas is 29 years old, hasn't played in 2 years due to injuries. No longer has the most accurate quarterback in the history of the NFL in Drew Brees. Now he has Jameis Winston, whose calling card is going deep, which is not Michael Thomas's calling card. We also have increased target competition with Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry there, and we have the offensive team fragility with Sean Payton gone. I think we have efficiency concerns. Sean Payton was so good at scheming to his players. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Michael Thomas, we talked about this one a ton. We have plenty of people in my mentions telling me they're doing like they remind me of this every time that I tweet something bad about Michael Thomas. Everybody's convinced that Michael Thomas is going to be what he once was. I am much, much, much more skeptical. Do not have any Michael Thomas at 58th overall. Evan, your second fade.
Najee Harris, and I actually just moved him down, ticked him down from RB8 to RB10, and that's because he's been dealing with a Liz Frank injury, and I don't like to hear that about a running back whose primary appeal in fantasy is like all based on volume, because those guys are already at an increased injury risk because of how many hits they take. Mm-hmm. So first of all, you weren't going to get him using the rankings already, but he's even further out of range now. Yeah. And I feel good about that. Okay. I think the Steelers are going to struggle to score points this year. They've got one of the worst offensive lines in the league, has looked horrible in the preseason. He had 94 targets last year. Okay. That was the most among NFL running backs. And that was in large part thanks to Ben Roethlisberger's check down tendency, just wanted to get the ball out of his hands. You knew he couldn't move anymore. The offensive line was bad. So he's throwing little comebackers to Diontae Johnson and dumps to Najee Harris all season long. Again, it's all about extreme volume workload for Najee Harris. He doesn't have big playability. Yeah. Okay. He topped 20 yards on 4 of his 307 carries last year, 4 out of 307. So this is just a player that, and I still think he's going to be probably pretty fine in fantasy. I have him as a top 10 fantasy running back, but this is not the kind of player that I want to draft. Yeah. I'm going to draft around him, and I'm going to let my opponents take him.
Yeah, I like the Najee Harris fade as well. Again, you're betting, as Evan said, just on pure volume. Offensive line is bad. Offensive environment is likely bad. And so talent level, I think, is not elite either. And so you start to get into real problems there with Najee Harris when he's going 12.1 is his ADP on Underdog. My second fade is going to be, I'll stay with Pittsburgh, Diontae Johnson. Diontae Johnson's going 48th overall. Remember last year he was at 1.89 yards per route run. Not really great, but that was on an outrageous 169 targets, 28% share. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger had it going on when he dropped back with Diontae Johnson. He would just like stare him down. Again, 28% target share. I mean, that's completely ridiculous. Now, new quarterback, George Pickens, Chase Claypool moving into the slot. I think there's a lot that can go wrong here. Ben Roethlisberger was essentially the offensive coordinator last year. Obviously, it's going to be Matt Canada this year. And so there's a lot that can go wrong for Diontae Johnson. I still think he's a good player. He gets open. This is not about the drops. I could care less. It'd be impossible for me to care less about the drops. This is about Diontae Johnson not being able to get anywhere close to a 28% target share going forward. And George Pickens' arrival. And I like Chase Claypool in the slot. And so to me, Pickens and Claypool are better picks where they go than where Diontae goes at 48th overall. Completely out on Diontae Johnson there. Evan, any thoughts on that? And then you can go ahead with your third shy away.
No, I've kind of been down on Diontae Johnson. Harkening back to when we had Matt Harmon on the podcast, he suggested that Ben Roethlisberger was actually holding back Diontae Johnson. Mm-hmm. I think that he can be right and we can still be right at the same time. That Diontae Johnson was actually a better player than he showed under Ben Roethlisberger, but he's not going to be as good in fantasy because he ain't getting close to 169 targets again.
Yep.
And there's potential for musical chairs at quarterback in Pittsburgh. My next guy is Deebo Samuel. And you've been, harping on this one. Yeah. So I'm kind of stealing this one from you. But, I agree with all your points. And I actually moved him down recently in my rankings because it was sort of getting to the point where all of a sudden people were starting to draft him. And I don't want the people to get him this season. He was just an efficiency monster last year, led the league in yards per reception at 18.2, but only had an 8-yard ADOT.
Yeah.
He scored 8 rushing touchdowns on 59 carries. Okay. You know what? Actually, that's the only stat you need to know. That's the only, and then now the transition to Trey Lance, which, hey, there may be a hiccup in that now that the 49ers are bringing back Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that it's better for Deebo Samuel if Jimmy Garoppolo's in there, but Trey Lance is certainly going to get, September, I think. And Trey Lance, his playing style, he's going to be a little bit more erratic as a thrower. They're going to run the ball with extreme volume. And But the team pass attempts are going to be down, and there's going to be more play action vertical shots. And that lends itself to more action for Brandon Ayuk, who has a higher ADOT and is more of a downfield threat than Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel is going to have an excellent season, I think, in real life, and he's not going to be remotely the fantasy player that he was last year.
Yeah, and I'm just shocked where he goes. I mean, people are assuming so much that he can sustain efficiency. 18th overall is Deebo Samuel's ADP, and to me, that's just crazy. I mean, there's just no way he can sustain the efficiency. I've obviously talked about that a ton already. All right, third fade for me is going to be Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz's ADP is 71st overall. Meanwhile, Dallas Goedert, 88th overall. TJ Hawkinson, 93rd overall. And then there's so many guys late that I like. Albert O, Irv Smith, David Njoku, Brevin Jordan, Marley Cox, Pat Freiermuth. So to go and use this real premium pick, 71st overall on Dalton Schultz, where I could be getting awesome wide receivers or quarterbacks, to me is a mistake because Dalton Schultz was a compiler last year. He played all 17 games, so his stats look really good. He caught 78 balls, 8 touchdowns. It looks really good when you play 17 games and you're reasonable. Dalton Schultz had 0 100-yard games. He had 0 games with more than 82 yards. I mean, he's not an explosive player at all. His underlying stats were not great. I think Hawkinson and Goddard are both clearly superior talents that go way later. And so to me, it's just an easy fade on Dalton Schultz with where he's going. I go wide receiver or quarterback there over Schultz every single time. Evan, any thoughts on that one? Then you can move on to your last fade of the season.
No, I mean, I get it. I mean, everything that you said was factual with Dalton Schultz. I think he's going to be a compiler again.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, okay with that, you know. I think he's, I don't think I've drafted him at all, actually.
Yeah.
But I do have him in the top 150 in a range where you could definitely end up taking him. But I get it. My final guy is going to be Cam Akers. And it's going to be because if you spent the last 20 years playing fantasy football and betting against running backs coming back from torn Achilles, you'd have like a 100% hit rate, literally 100% hit rate. And we just saw this with Marlon Mack getting cut. You know, he's a pretty good player before the injury, and he can't even make the Texans now. Cam Akers did return last year. He wasn't good. And, you know, the fact is the Rams are now telling us that he's not going to be a workhorse back. It's a little scary because I don't like betting against guys in the Rams offense. You know, Sean McVay's really good. They're going to have a good offensive line again. Matthew Stafford is a teammate elevator. So it's a little bit scary from that standpoint, but I don't think he's going to get the workload. And I'm worried that if his efficiency is anything like it was after he came back last year, you know, they're never going to get him back to a point where he's a true bell cow. So he's just a guy that I'm, again, letting other people draft.
Yeah, totally agree with Evan on this one. I gave my full Cam Akers take on Market Monday. You guys can go back and listen to that a couple podcasts ago, but totally on board with the Cam Akers fade. Last one I'll give is J.K. Dobbins, and his ADP is currently 56th overall. And I really did like J.K. Dobbins when he was going in the 6th or 7th round, and sometimes even the 8th round. But now we're talking about a running back who isn't very healthy. I mean, may not be ready for week 1. Doesn't seem like they'll be ready to give him a full workload anytime soon. His quarterback doesn't target running backs much. And I think he's kind of unlikely to ever get a workhorse role. We know they just added Kenyon Drake. Gus Edwards will be back at some point. They have Tyler Beatty. They have Mike Davis. You know, it's hard to see J.K. Dobbins ever getting to 20 carries in a game anyways. Now, can he get there on extreme efficiency in November and December? Yeah. And to me, that's where like the J.K. Dobbins optimism comes in. Hey, we win money in fantasy in November and December. J.K. Dobbins is likely to be healthy, very healthy at that point. And I think he'll be very, very efficient. So it's a bit of a scary fade for me down the line, but I feel good about not using a 4th or 5th round pick right away, particularly in redraft leagues where I don't have big benches and I can stash J.K. Dobbins. You know, I like being off him and taking some other wide receivers or quarterbacks in that range where he goes. All right. If you want to see the full shy away list that Evan has up, head to establishedrun.com. It is indeed in our draft kit. Also check out the props thing, as I mentioned at the top, and DFS in-season content schedule is also up in the about section of the site. For Evan, for Bruce Luke, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.